No, not to this back.
Oh, okay. That's true.
All right, so.
So, Dick, what's your earliest memory growing up on the farm?
Let's see, I was about, let me see, what that was. I was real small, 2 or 3 years old.
I was in 1923 or 24.
I'd say 2 years old.
23.
Huh?
1923.
That'd be about 23.
He was born at an early age.
And, our dining room table, and then, okay, it was one of those that, stuff about so high, maybe 2.5 feet, from the floor up to the lower part of the table. And I always had an awful time, and I was usually sitting on the floor when I got finished, but I'd walk around and go under the table, and I didn't fit, because the table came about right there. And when I walked up and hit that, and down I went to the floor. And I can remember that I was hollering, screaming, you know how that is when you're a kid, yeah, And
I never did.
of course, Mom was running there to see what happened here. Because, but I did that I did that a lot of times while I was about that age. Until I got wise enough to know you can't go under the table when you're
I remember that. That was a memory.
That answers a lot of questions, that I've had about this all these years. Took you, how many years to bump your head like that?
Well, until I grew old enough up here to realize
you bumped your nose.
You just don't fit. No.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time under that table.
Yeah, well, on the floor.
Rolling around on that floor.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well,
the other thing we did is we polished the floor too, remember?
The what?
How we polished the floor when Mom would wax the floor?
Yeah.
It was linoleum. Well, we'd get on a, I guess it was a towel or a rug, and we pulled around, polished it under that table. And,
Yeah, I can't hear if you're not talking loud now.
oh, read my lips.
Read your lips.
Yeah, that was
No, that was when I was young, but of course I grew up a little bit, and our farm was situated where we had a huge car lot and a lot of animals, and I was only the fourth, from the oldest, so there were more before me that went through the same thing I did. But the first thing you were told is you never go to the cow lot. You never go into that gate, because there are animals in there, and you might get hurt. And Mom ran her legs off trying to catch all of it. We all did the same thing as the years went by. But I know this one time, and I must have been probably 5 years, no, it was less than that, 4 years old or so. And I did go through the lot, and I went out through what we called the lane. The lane ran out into the pasture, and that was for where all the animals went to eat grass, whatever. And we had this horse, Rex. He was, we used him for riding and also pulling the carriage. And he was a real good horse, but he was smart, pretty smart. And he was out there eating grass, and I went out, and this is from the house out there, that had to be probably 250 yards at least out to where he was. I don't know how I got out there without somebody seeing me, but I did. And he was eating grass, and he's one of those, he's eating, but he's got his eyes are kind of looking around, watching. He saw me coming, and he didn't move, and I wanted to see him run, is what I was trying to do. I was hollering at him and everything, and he didn't pay attention. But I picked up corn stalk, which was there from, we used to feed the cattle corn stalks, let them eat the leaves off of them. And I took it and I went up and I hit him on the heel, And when I did that, then he let me have it. And he caught me just about right here in the chest. And I don't remember from there on until I was at the house. My mother was carrying me, and I was out by that cottonwood tree, you know, out in that area is when I woke up. And, but it didn't hurt me, you know, he just knocked me out.
How old were you?
I was on probably about 3 or 4.
Wow.
I wasn't heavy enough so she couldn't carry me, but she carried me from there all the way to the house. And that's when I woke up. But he was a smart horse, though. That son of a gun, he was. And I was only like 3 or 4. And I remember I used to ride him to town when I was, well, maybe 12 or 13 years old. And I'd ride him to town, you know, to get, say, Mom wanted something from the store. I'd, you know, ride him to town, hitch him up to the rail at, over by the printing shop. They had a rack there, you know, for hitching horses. And I'd tie him up, I'd go in and get what I wanted and come back out. And then I'd go and get the bridle. The bridle was there, the horse was gone. And I'd take the bridle and walk home. We were 2 miles south of there. And I'd walk on home and he'd be at home in the garden, in the potting garage. He did that a couple of times. But I finally put a rope on his neck, you know, that he couldn't take the rope off. But he was that kind of a horse that
What happened to
he
Rex?
always knew what was going on around him.
What happened to Rex, Dick?
Rex?
Rex.
But he finally just got too old, you know, and he died. But Dad used to say he belonged to a circus group, and they worked him in the circus, you know, as a show, and he could really prance. He could do any step, single foot, anything you wanted him to do, you know, he would do it. He was a real smart horse, beautiful horse too. But you had to be careful, you know. He always had his own mind going. We had a sheep. We called him Billy. He was one of those that my dad worked for a guy that owned sheep, and this happened to be in the wintertime. It's cold and early in the winter, and she had too many sheep. She had a couple, you know, like a 3 sheep, where they don't do that normally. They have one little lamb, and but anyway, she couldn't take care of them all, so Dad brought one home. And so he brought it home, and we had a stove in the dining room, and it's what we heated by, and we had a place behind the stove that we put the sheep, a little cage like, tiny little baby thing, cute. So we raised him and fed him, you know, and he grew up. And we called him Billy. And he'd be loose in the yard, running around, you know. And after he got so big, everybody teased him. They always had a notion to hit him in the forehead, you know. And you don't do that to a sheep. They have a hard hit. But after a while, when they get bigger, then they're going to take it out on you. And they did. You didn't turn your back on him after a while. He'd come from the back and hit you. He hit you hard, too. But this sheep went he was in the barn one day when this Rex, the horse, was tied up in the barn. That was down in the main barn where the milking stanchions were.
The old barn.
In there. And he comes in, sheep started coming in there. Well, Rex reached around and grabbed him by the middle of the back and raised him right off the floor, you know, right off the ground, you know, and shook him. Well, doing that, he injured the back, you know, he pulled the wool and injured it. So he got sick. We treated that sheep for a long time and got rid of all of this infection. But that's where the horse was. You know, anything that comes around, he's going to give him a hard time. And he did with that sheep. But we had that sheep for gosh, for a long, long time. And, remember we traded it for a bicycle. It was the first bicycle we ever had. And we traded that seat for a bicycle.
I wonder where that Jeep ended up.
I don't know.
The circus, maybe.
Yeah.
So Larry, what are some of your first memories of the farm?
Yeah, I guess probably just living on a farm is an experience in itself. I guess you had to work at different levels. When you were little, you had a chore, a task that you had to do every day. First one was gathered eggs. Go around, find out where the chickens are laying eggs, number one. Most of them are in the chicken house, but a lot of them don't go to the chicken house. They go off and find a place where they can make their own nest and lay their own eggs, and you gotta hunt for that. So there's an Easter egg hunt every year, every day, every year. And you had a bucket. And I remember one time I was, had maybe a half a bucket full of eggs, and went over to check this one area out where a chicken was laying eggs. And when I got back, I found a pig in my bucket eating the eggs. So that was a cash crop. That was one of the only cash crops we had, and so that was a serious problem. When you lose a half a bucket of eggs, probably a couple dozen. So get that damn pig out of my bucket and go and try to gather up the rest of the eggs and explain to Mom and Dad why I didn't protect the bucket. More carefully.
How much were the eggs? They were what, I think they were 17 cents a dozen, weren't they?
Probably about 17 cents.
That's
Yeah,
about what it was.
that sounds reasonable.
And we had, we've collected 30 dozen a day.
How many chickens did you have?
15,
They
we
ran,
started- in the spring, we started 1,500
Well,
eggs, babies. But then as years go by, you cull them out, you take the roosters out, sell those when they get large enough, maybe 3 or 4 months. And then the rest of them, then you raise as laying hens for the next year.
We ate a bunch of them.
Huh?
We ate a bunch of the roosters.
Oh, the roosters, yeah, we had a lot, they were good.
they were really babies.
Yeah, they were good.
They actually, the incubator was in the house for the eggs.
In Mom and Dad's bedroom.
That's right. And
You know
so
where we got
it was
the
kept-
eggs?
It was kept, huh?
You know where we got the eggs?
Chickens?
Yeah.
Montgomery Ward.
No.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's right. We
Chickens
bought
came
those
first.
1,500 every spring we
Yeah.
bought.
Order them in the
And
catalog.
so we had what we call a brooder house. And when those chicks, when those eggs would hatch, then those little chicks were put in the brooder house. It was a round,
That was the old silo.
structure. It was the old silo. But it was probably what, diameter, probably about
15.
Yeah,
About
15
yeah.
feet. And so those little chicks would be in that brooder house, and there was in the center was to keep them warm. There was a kind of a stove like,
A hood.
Oh,
Big
yeah.
hood.
And those little rascals, you go in there, when you go in there, you'd have to shuffle your feet. You couldn't walk because you step on the chick. So you shuffle and they're all over you. They're really funny because they're attracted to you. And they're all peeping and, but that's how they start out. And then from there, they're all over the place. In fact, they were a problem for me because when I was little, I had a game, or we all had a game. It was to take a tire, and we would run that tire by hitting it, I guess, and roll it around, in the yard, in the farmyard,
As a toy.
like a toy. Well, the problem was, you see, the chickens didn't, they weren't
Get out
very
of the way.
discriminatory about where they would, poop, and so that tire would rust, and then you suddenly, you got slipped. So we had to wash our hands a lot.
You did?
Well, you didn't, okay. Then the other thing is, during the summer, always the summer, we went barefoot. We never wore shoes. And that was another problem with the chickens. They were all over. And then the other thing was the roosters were not very friendly sometimes. So there was one particular rooster that when you would go out and you leave the house, you had to look to see where the rooster was before you left. And then when you went to wherever from where you are to wherever you're going, you had to run like crazy because that rooster is going to come and attack you. Remember that rooster?
Yeah.
And he'd scratch the heck out of you and bite your ankles and your barefoot, right?
They have, on the inside of their leg, they have a spur.
Yeah.
And that spur is like up to 2 inches long.
And they get up like this.
And they come up and they do that on your leg. And you get cut. Yeah, they were on me.
Dick was talking about that sheep. At one point, during the winter, it got very cold there. And so when the sows had their piglets, sometimes they would, they'd be out in the cold. And this one particular pig, you guys, I don't know if you remember this, but that pig was run, and it lost its tail. It didn't have a tail because it froze off. And so I guess my mom or dad brought it in the house, put it in a box, and put it next to the stove. And so it was, it stayed there, and it kind of it really became a pet after a while. And we had this cart. It was a two-wheel cart. It had two big steel wheels that were probably about, I was little, so I guess they looked like 6 feet to me, but I think they were about 4 feet in diameter.
I'd say 4 is reasonable.
Yeah,
3.5, 4 feet.
And so, put that pig in there and run him around, give him a ride, and then we tie a rope to his back leg and take him to market, and all this with a stick, You just have fun with that pig. Well, he grew up. I don't know whatever happened to that pig.
Maybe.
It didn't live the life it made, the pig.
You probably don't want to know what
He got
happened to that
sold, I
pig.
think.
No, you probably ate him for dinner.
I hope not. He's kind of a pet. But
Well,
things like that, the animals on the farms, you sort of, sometimes you get attached to them, but then you don't, because you can't. Because you're here today and gone tomorrow because they were there for, a reason. And that was the pigs, the livestock, the cattle, and well, the horses stuck around though. But,
You mentioned the big barn, the old barn.
Hmm.
We call it the big barn and the horse barn.
yeah.
Yeah, the big barn was, that was mainly for livestock. One half of it was for milking, and part of it was, one end of it was for any kind of an animal. It was, for instance, the boar. The boar, they can get meat, and you have to keep those in a separate place. But then the rest of it was, we milked up to about 21 cows at one time. And they all had stanchions. And a stanchion is a thing that you put up and you feed the cow. When we go in, they put their head in and then you close the stanchion and it brings it up so that they can't get loose. They just have to stay there until you milk them.
And each cow has his own slot, and nobody is allowed in that slot. If some other cow gets in that slot, that cow will come and spit them out.
And how many cows did you guys have?
Well, total cows, at one time I can remember 75, but these were milk cows. We had as many as 21.
Well, that was the other cash crop too, was the milk.
Every one of them had a name.
Cream.
Every cow had a name.
Cream, not milk.
Cream, yeah.
cream was the other cash crop. We took the milk, when we milked the cows, we would take it up to what we call the separator, and you pour the milk in the top and crank the handle like crazy, and the cream would go out one spout, and the whey would go out the other. We used that to feed the chickens and the pigs, and the cream was sold. That was a cash crop.
Those milk cans, you know, the old milk cans, that's what they put in.
Take the milk and the eggs to the produce market in town, and get a little money, and go over to the Young's grocery store, and Mom would buy things that we couldn't grow on our own.
So that was all of your chores each day, was doing all of that?
Every morning you got up and you went out, and number one, you had to feed the animals. Two, you had to milk them, get the milk, get the eggs, things like that. And then during the day, you went out into the field and you worked to till the crops to feed the animals, so that you had the animals to milk and to so on and so forth. So during the day, you worked to feed the animals, and then in the morning, you harvested the milk and the eggs, etc. And the evening, the same thing. So every day, you had a morning and an evening, milking and gathering the eggs and so on and so forth, gathering the crop. And during the day, you created the crop. When we were in school, we would do that before we went to school, and then we'd go to school and come home and do it again. And while we were gone, those that weren't in school were out working in the field.
Now I see why your parents had 11 kids.
Yeah, that was planned.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was a plan. That was a method of creating and developing and maintaining a farm.
Right.
Because when those guys went in the Army and they left, you know, Frank was probably 12, I was 10, something like that. And then Gary was just a little punk. And Don was in a little quit.
Well, no, actually I was 8.
But you didn't do anything.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. No.
I gave that thing a...
But everybody had to move up in a level of responsibility. I remember when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I was out working in the field, you know, driving a team of horses and cultivating and plowing and do stuff like that. And first time I got drunk was on a hayfield. Got a real problem.
Isn't that when you hurt your ankle?
I was probably 11, 12, and my sister Millie, it was her fault, because she brought lunch, and she brought us each, there was Dad and Frank and I out doing hay, stacking hay, and so she brought us lunch, and she brought us each a bottle of beer, homebrew.
And it wasn't cold beer.
No,
Well, it was beer Dad made.
I mean, it was something, you know, you didn't drink beer then to drink beer. You drank it because you had to drink something, and it was preserved.
That was
We didn't have
home brewed.
We didn't have refrigeration, so she couldn't bring us a glass of iced milk, you know, or anything like that. If it was milk, it was warm. And so consequently, beer was a staple. And you drank it because it was there and it was nutritious and so on. But Frank didn't want his beer, and so I drank it. So I had 2 beers. That's it. The cop always says, how much you had to drink? You say 2 beers? That's what I said. 2 beers.
And let me tell you what kind of beer that was. When you open it, and like you take a mixing bowl, I think, and you'd hold it here, and then the beer you put out here, punch a hole in the cap, and then it was that powerful. It would just come out of that bottle with a lot of force. It was powerful beer. Home brew. And then on top of that,
So you-
another.
Too much for the 10-year-old to handle, is that what you're saying?
I was driving the buck brake.
There was no law,
Yeah.
really, it was just,
What's a buck brake? Tell them what a buck brake
Okay,
is.
but tell them what happened to you after you drank those 2 beers,
You know,
Larry.
he's been driving a buck brake. What's a buck brake?
We were stacking hay, so a buck brake is about, it was about 10, 12 feet wide.
about 10, yeah.
And you had a horse on each tongue, about 10, 12 feet wide. And all the rest of it in here are 2x4s, about a foot apart, each one sharpened on the point, and about 6 to 8 feet long. And you're sitting back here in a chair, and the horses are like there, and you're going down a row, we call it a windrow, which was, we had previously stacked the hay with a rake into a big, long row of hay. And the buck brake came down this row of hay, and it kept piling up on the buck brake, and then you take it in to a stacker and deposit it on the lift to put it on the stack. And generally what you would do is, you have 2 ways. You could right up front, stand on the 2x4s, and then when the hay come in, you would just sort of walk up on the hay as it kept piling up under your feet, and you would go up and up and up and up and up until you had a big pile. The other was sit on the dumb seat back there. I never did do that. I guess it's too small. But anyhow, go like that, and what happened is after I had 2 beers, I slipped off the 2x4s. And my foot went underneath the buck brake and sprained my ankle. And so when I
That was
got
his
the load
first
into the
Drunk
stacker,
driving incident, though.
and
Yeah, drunk driving at the age of 10, Grandpa.
Yeah.
Shame on you.
well, I was probably 11. So when I got into the stacker and dumped the load and then told Dad, I couldn't walk because I was hopping on one foot.
That wasn't the reason you couldn't walk.
The reason was I had sprained ankle.
Oh, I thought it was beer.
No, wasn't a beer. And so Dad put Frank on the buck brake then and put me on the stacker horse, where the stacker horse just did nothing but drive out about 50, 80 feet, long enough to where the flocking tackle would pull the load up on the stack, and then you'd back the horse up, and the loader would come down. And you drive it out, back and forth. That's all you had to do. Drive it out, pull it back.
This guy's 11 years old doing this. Guy.
So it was a simple job. So, and then in between loads, you'd sit in the shade of the stack so that you get out of the sun. And I was not feeling well. And so anyhow, I fell on the framework of the stacker was probably 12 by 12. And I fell and I hit my mouth on that beam, busted my lip, and now I didn't feel as good as I used to. But I sat in the shade, and so Dad told me, stay there, So that was my first experience with beer.
That wasn't your first experience with beer.
Well, I didn't enjoy it.
So you really
The beer,
lived this guy.
there was a cave, we called it. It was actually a cellar. The potatoes and all that down there, and the beer.
Fruit cellar.
Fruit cellar, yeah. And the beer and the wine. Yeah. Well, it just couldn't be alone.
There's 11 kids in the house.
So kids would, in those days, kids would imbibe very early, and it was okay, You did, didn't you? Did you try that wine down there in the cellar?
Yeah, that's another story.
Well, that reminds me of when we on Saturday night, everybody went to town. There's a movie, an outdoor movie, and they had it not on a screen, actually on a building. Remember that? On that building.
On a jail.
No, it was next to the jail. That was I think it was blacksmith shop or something. But they'd play the movie on there, and they were all usually westerns, you know, the Gene Autry and all the old westerns. And so that's what we do on Saturday night. But then the kids were always kind of turned loose, you know. Do anything you want. So there was a blacksmith shop there. Behind that was a hog shed. And so Gerald Frisch, no, not Gerald, Francis Frisch brought wine, you know, bottles of wine. They, you know, all the farmers made wine. And he brought that under the, you know, when you're in the Model A's, you had the seat that you know, come up with a little place down underneath where you could store things, you know. And that's where he stored the wine. He'd bring it in. And so on that Saturday night, I only did this once. But we were in that hog shed back there, passing that bottle of wine around. And that was our Saturday night. And then, of course, there was the movie. You know, we'd go to the movie. Had a tenting around the area, and usually
The tarp.
the tarp, yeah. And
Yeah.
then they charge a dime,
Nickel.
nickel, yeah, the nickel.
The nickel.
So anyway, I was in there. I paid a nickel. Went in, sat down, and then somebody came to the side of the tarp and lifted up, said they wanted to, I guess that was, we were gonna go have a little wine. So, went out, came back, and a guy caught me, and said I had to pay. I said, I already paid. Well, you didn't have tickets in those days, you just had a nickel. So, I had a little problem with that one. I didn't get kicked out, I finally, you know, convinced him I was legitimate, and so that was the kind of stuff that farm kids did, you know.
Well, the movie, let me explain a little bit about that movie, because it was interesting, because they would come to town, this guy would come to town with a movie, the whole tarp, the whole shebang, and he would recruit a bunch of kids, and if you could get in that group, you would get to set the tarp up, and all the chairs and everything, for the people to watch the movie, and you get a nickel to get in free. So he'd give you a nickel and take it right back when you watch the movie. So he got free labor, basically is what he did, you know, and it worked. And then they would show the movie on the building, and then they had to take this whole thing down, the tarp, and all the chairs had to be hauled in and everything, so he'd give you another nickel. And so now you had a nickel to get in next time, you know. And so it worked out to where he got the neighborhood kids to do the labor to create the movie too. But Gary, I think the wall that was there, white wall that they showed the movie
jail was
on,
too small.
I think that was a jail.
That was too small.
It was a jail.
Huh?
It was a jail.
You think they
Yeah.
played it on the jail?
These guys got off real cheap because we got it for nothing. The movie was free, but the only problem was it was a silent movie. You know, these old
Well, then it was.
old Charlie Chaplin, and they had to crank the movie machine. You know, it was operated by hand. But those guys had to pay. We didn't. We saw it all over.
That was earlier, Dick. You know, inflation.
You had to make up your own dialogue.
Well, no, you could read their lips.
They had subtitles when we.
Can you imagine Charlie Chaplin movies? Have you ever seen any of them?
Well, they were good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're good.
They still play.
They're funny. Yeah.
Later on, shortly before we moved though, there was a theater on Main Street.
Yeah, that's right.
And it
We
cost-
went there.
It cost 10 cents to go
That's
in.
right, that's the dime. Yeah, we went there too, and those were silent movies.
Yeah, I
too.
know. I remember that. Yeah.
That was next to near the grocery store there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they played
Not
music.
far from
Then,
Dawson's Bar.
later, they,
Remember
Yeah,
Dawson's?
right. Oh, wow. Yeah.
later, even still, later, it was in the Opera House. They had movies up in the Opera
Yeah.
House, remember that? The Opera House was a feed store. There's a feed store down below, you know, with all the stuff for you know, for feeding animals and stuff like that. Well, upstairs was a kind of an auditorium like, that was the Opera House.
Renting out a film?
Kind of an interesting place. All torn down now. Gone. That was sad. Yeah. But there were, well, then there was school. You know, we did go to school. And, I remember in the morning, it was really cold. It was winter. And, we wore boots. We wore laced up boots. And then, you know, layered with all kinds of coats and stuff. And then we got into a cart. It was a two-wheel cart, horse-drawn. I think, Dick, you drove it, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And take us to school in town.
Yeah.
And we'd all huddle up in front, you know, to keep warm.
We used the buggy.
Huh?
We used the buggy.
Well, yeah, we didn't, we had that cart.
Two-wheel, I don't remember.
I think it wasn't a two-wheel there?
I did.
Well, then later used the Model A. Of course, that was when we got hit that time. Remember that banker hit us? He was driving the Model A in town, and the banker came out of the, I guess he was coming out of the gas station.
That was the guy from down at the elevator. He ran the
Oh, he
elevator.
wasn't the banker, the elevator, okay.
It was by the bank.
Huh?
Right in front of the bank.
Okay. Well, he hit us, you know, ran into us.
What do you remember about that?
I remember this, that in the morning, if we had to get out of there in a hurry to get to town, to get to school, and Mom would fry us egg sandwiches to take with us. If we didn't get breakfast, she insisted we have breakfast, have egg sandwiches. So, well, we got hit, the egg sandwiches were all over the place in that car.
The thing I remember about that accident is after the crash and everything, damn mouse ran out from under the...
That's right, there was a mouse in it.
Well, how old were you? What grade were you in?
Third?
The third grade?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were you and Frank.
I was in the sixth
And
grade.
Marianne was in high school.
Yeah, she was
Marianne,
she took good care of me in high school.
Frank was in the eighth
No, she was in the eighth grade.
Frank was...
Marianne was in the eighth
She
grade.
was in
No.
the eighth grade? Oh, yeah.
No, I think Frank was.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Marianne was
Okay.
in high school.
That's right, yeah,
Yeah.
you were.
Yeah, but anyway, this town is a small town, and it has one main street running straight through, and then the side streets, of course, there's no stop signs, but you have to know when you live there that this is a main street, you know. You have to get open eye. Well, I was coming in, and this is upgrade, and a 29 Ford, Model A Ford, and they don't have much power. And I got up to this intersection, and I saw the guy coming, but I couldn't do anything. I stepped on the gas, and the car wouldn't move to get out of his way. And the sun was coming from the east, shining into his eyes. He didn't see me at all. Well, he hit me right at the rear wheel, and spun the car all the way around.
Egg sandwiches went all over the place.
But anyway, and this is just to let you know just exactly what an accident is at those days and what it would be today. The guy that was driving the car that hit me, he, of course, I never heard an apology or anything from anybody. But he got out and he looked it over, and then finally we ended up in the garage, and they looked the car over. Well, one wheel was gone. It was bad. And so he bought the wheel. I think it was $1. He paid for the wheel to replace it. And that's all it cost him. Just $1 for the wheel. The rest of it was just shoved under the rug, you know. lawsuits or anything like that involved with that.
Well, I remember though, we were waiting for that car to be repaired to come back home. That
Huh?
car was, well, that car, we were waiting for it to come back home after. it was
Oh, no, you
repaired.
didn't. It went in the garage there.
I know, but I'm saying,
And you
after
guys
that.
walked on up to school, didn't you? From there?
Yeah.
Eventually.
But,
We went, first of all, we all went into the grocery store, and I know we sat there for a while, but Frank was the only one that really got shaken up. He was right by the wheel where, you know, the car hit. And didn't knock him out, but he was dazed. And we sat there until he recovered and everything, and everybody else went to school. And then, I don't recall, I went into the garage and waited. I think your dad was working there at that time.
yeah, and, yeah.
Part-time, he
Digger's
was
garage,
happy to be there. Yeah, and we were all standing there looking at the car, you know, and here this mouse comes walking.
Out of the car. He's been living in his car.
He wasn't shaking at all.
Well, you know that car, we had a little problem. I remember one time, when Dick picked me up from school, and, it had a short. And the smoke started coming up out from underneath the dashboard. You don't remember that?
No.
Well, I do, because I tell you what, I bailed out. I don't know why I did this. I bailed out of that car, and then after I got out, I hung on to it, and it was dragging me. And there was gravel on the road. It was not paved road, it was gravel. Oh, man, the only good part of it was that when I got home, and I was scraped up, and Mom was taking care of me, and I got ice cream.
Ice cream? So it's worth
I
it.
wasn't driving then.
Where the hell did you get ice cream?
I don't know, Mom gave me some ice cream. It must have been left over from the Sunday.
You know, I
know,
you know, you're making all that up.
Huh? No.
Because I wasn't driving.
You were driving, Dick.
I didn't even know you were in the car then.
That's because I left.
You were dragging
That
back there,
car
I
was
didn't even
gonna burn
know
up.
you were around.
You were driving. Yeah, you don't remember that?
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, you don't remember it shorting out?
Huh?
You don't remember it shorting out? The wires are shorting out?
No.
You don't? Well, I'll tell you what, it wasn't Frank, he wasn't old enough to drive, it wasn't Larry.
What year was that when you say you were in school?
Well-
What year?
Well, I was
Okay.
in, let's see, second or third grade. Before you went in the army.
Where was this? You were.
Before Dick crashed the car?
Well, it was about the same time. I mean,
You weren't on cars,
it was about the same.
No, I've only had one accident in my life.
Because that wasn't an accident.
One
It wasn't,
accident.
it wasn't your fault, it wasn't an accident. It just happened.
It was deliberate.
No, I've been driving since I was 16 years old. I
Yeah.
have no mark on my record.
That wasn't your
wait,
fault.
wait,
Oh, we just
Tell me,
did.
when did you get your driver's license?
That was when I was about, I don't remember the age, but I sent 50 cents into
Yeah.
the county in Anderson County and got my license.
That's all. What kind of test did you take?
None.
No test, they didn't give test.
You learned to drive in the pasture, right?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of this,
We
yeah.
take the Model A and go out in the pasture and get the cows and things like that. And, you know, driving was not a priority, licensing was not a priority.
That's why he got in an accident.
Well, he probably had a license by then.
Well, it wasn't his fault, that accident wasn't his fault.
That was the
guy
thing, that there
came out
was
of
no
it.
one involved in, in no law at all involved.
No,
We had a mayor, a marshal in
Didn't have a
town,
driver's
the only
license.
guy we had,
Driving
any kind of official. But that day, I don't remember anyone around, any official at all around.
Who was official? John Bouse. John Bouse was the only official.
Lauren Bouse.
Lauren, yeah,
Lauren Bouse.
right.
Yeah.
Lauren
Yeah.
Bouse. He was the, what, sheriff,
He was the marshal.
deputy marshal,
Just a
whatever?
marshal, yeah. he didn't do anything, you know, he was just a marshal. No, he was the one that, when, that was in, early 42. I was working for Slanders at the time, and was in town, and there was a bunch of us gathered there talking, you know. A couple of them that I went to school with, and this is, you know, about 42. And I had my notice that I was, you know, going to be drafted, but I didn't have a notice to go into the service. Waiting on that. So we decided we were going to western Kansas and do the harvest. And so this Lorne Bouse, he was the guy who was the head of it. He had a pickup truck. And so he and there were three others. We all agreed, yep, okay, we'll go. So on Saturday evening, we took off for Dodge City is where we were going. And that's about 200 miles from where we were there. And we went there and we got a room in a hotel in the town of Buckland, Kansas. And about 6 o'clock in the morning, they hollered and they said, anyone want to go to work? Come on down. So we did. We went down and went to work. And we went into the harvest. We all went into the shocking stuff, you know, wheat.
Wait,
And
what do you mean shocking?
shocking is picking it up, bundles of it, and stacking it, you know, in stacks. And then they come along and pick it up and take it in and throw it in the thrashing machine and separate the seed from the trash. And so we did that. I was only there about, maybe an hour and a half or so. I didn't get much done at all there. And they came out and they needed a guy to drive the truck. So, okay. So I went, got in the truck, drove. Then I would go to the field and haul the stuff from the combine into the elevator. And when they fill a hopper on the machine, then they call for you and you come and you unload it into the truck. Haul it into the elevator.
The jag change.
And so I did that for just a short time. And then they come out and they said, well, we need somebody to drive the tractor, pull the combine. So then I went to that. And I went out there and pulled the combine we had one, it was 500 acres is what it was in this one field. And we did that, 500 acres of wheat. And we got that finished. So we're moving from there to another town, to Syracuse, which is around 70 miles or something north. And so it was funny, I was out in the field, I had, the tractor was out in the field yet, and they said, okay, then you bring the tractor in, we'll meet you in town, load it up, and combine and everything. They had these big trailers, you know, that you pull this stuff onto. And coming in, I drove the tractor in the ditch alongside. It was a hard road, and those were not rubber tires. Those were those lugs bouncing around, and you're traveling 20 miles an hour. So I was driving down the road. Remember the plant soldiers there, that drain that went through there? Well, there was quite a dip. Well, I got up to the dip and I couldn't stop. There was no brake on those tractors. And I went nosed right into that ditch. And I couldn't back it out. It just wouldn't, it just spin, wheels would spin. So I went over to the neighbor, it was not too far away, and got a shovel. Was working away trying to dig the dirt out so that I get the front end to move back. And I had to leave the thing running all this time. The tractor was running because it's at an angle like that, and your transmission oil is drained all the way to the top. And I figured, you know, that it'll overheat, you know, eventually. Well, it wasn't too long, and somebody, evidently, they missed me uptown there. This one guy comes back out, and I guess it was hot too, you know. So he told, the first thing he said, you better sit down there, you're overheating. And so I sit down, he took the shovel, he dug the one up, and finally got it down to where he could back it out. He got out, and we went around town. We loaded everything up that night, and we took off. And we went north. And by the time we got there, the guy that was running the combine, he evidently went to a party or something, and he didn't show up the next day. So this was just, you know, after the war started. And you couldn't get help anywhere. So the guy, this Arnie Kirk, was the owner of, he had 2 combines running there. And he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. He says, I don't have a guy to operate the combine. And he said, I'm going to have to pull the unit out. And so I said, well, let me take the combine. I can operate it, both of them. It's okay, I know how to operate the combine. So he finally said, well, we'll try it and see how it happens. So we went. Sure enough, I could take it. There was nothing to operate in the combine after you get it running, you know. And so he paid me 2 men's wages while I was running it. So that was a good deal. So I did that then until I finally got the letter in the mail that said, come on in, we need you better over here.
That was a problem for the whole farming community. It's a guys like Dick and Ray and
Was Ozzy already gone?
Ozzy and
Huh?
Was Ozzy already in?
Cleve had already been in the
Yeah.
service.
Oh, yeah, he had completed
All
already.
All these
they
young people were
volunteered.
gone.
Yeah, so Cleve and Ozzy were gone, and he
Yeah.
went in, and then Ray was still in high school.
Yeah, and when Ray got out, then he went to Lawrence, worked for a while, and he got drafted.
Yeah, I was in Africa when Ray got in, and he came to Oran. No, he went to Morocco. He came to Morocco, Africa.
He was, yeah.
And then he went from there to Italy,
Right.
to the Anzio.
He went to Anzio, then went to Rome.
Well, back up, though, when Ray was drafted, he came to Camp Roberts in California for
Yeah.
training.
He was a Robert.
And that's when Clete and Flo, oldest sister and brother, came back to Kansas and got Dad in the wash house. And they must have just put him through hell because he didn't want to leave that farm. And they said, you can't stay on the farm, it's, you know, it's done.
Dad was 56 years old at that time.
55, I think. Yeah.
Well, 55 then, 56 when we got to California.
Yeah, but anyhow, they finally convinced him to sell it, get the hell out of town. And so that's when he put well, he didn't own the farm. Yeah, Grandpa owned the farm. We sharecropped. We gave Grandpa and Grandma 1/3 of everything that was produced on the farm went to them for rent.
And how many acres did you have on the farm?
160, wasn't it?
Wow.
Yeah.
160 acres.
Wow.
And so then all Dad owned was the animals, the implements, the equipment and stuff like that. So they sold everything. And to the best of my knowledge, he got about $5,000 for everything. For the sale.
For everything.
The total gross sale.
Oh, he got more than that, surely, didn't he?
I don't think so.
For animals and everything?
Everything. I think it was 5,000 something.
Oh, yeah.
A little over 5,000. But anyhow, with that, then we were going to come to California. But Ray was in Camp Roberts, and he was going to get out of basic training in December. And so we were waiting and go to Germany. And we were waiting for him to come. And so I think the sale was in September. And then we moved to Grandma, Grandpa and Grandma's house in town, and stayed for the 2 months waiting for Ray. And when he then got out of basic training, came through, and on his way to Germany, then we left Christmas Eve. We left Kansas, Westphalia, to to come to California and spent Christmas in Wichita at Jeff's house. Adam and Helen Jeff. And a little side story, Helen was an orphan training child, where in New York they loaded all the deserted children on the streets and stuff on the orphan trains and sent them west. And as they arrived at a railroad station, they would get off and people would say, "I want that one." And they would take that
And
child.
usually it was so they could help farm.
Sometimes brothers and sisters were separated,
Yeah.
and sometimes they weren't.
And usually they were selected so they could work the farm or help in the house or something.
Well,
Yeah.
they became one of the
Yeah.
children of that family and worked like all the rest of
The
the children.
interesting part is, Aunt Helen never knew she was adopted.
Well, in this case, there was Dad and his sister Mary, and Mary was the only girl. So they picked up Helen then, and so
Another girl.
Mary would have a sister.
So they had 2 boys and 2 girls. Had Dad and Joe and Helen and Mary. And that made up their family. But we spent that Christmas at their house in Wichita, and then came on to California after that.
What was the hardest part of living on the farm?
I don't think you really feel a hard part
Yeah.
when you're little. You
know,
take what you get. For instance, one example is like when you go to school. You know, you are you don't have any extra money at all. No spending money.
And that was,
So you have these kids, you know, the other kids, and they have pencils. You know, the penny pencils. You ever see a penny pencil?
Probably
That's all
not.
we got was a penny pencil.
Just
But then your friend over here, he has a nickel pencil. And there's a lot of difference. The penny pencil is a piece of stick with lead in the center, and on the end it has a little rubber molded in the end for an eraser. You know, but the nickel pencil, they are, you know, they have color. They have yellow maybe, and at the end it has a little brass deal with a rubber mounted in it, you know. And there's a lot of difference between that. But these are the things you notice, you know, when you're, you know, like we weren't wealthy, we didn't have a lot of money.
we didn't know we were poor.
But there were other things, you know, like, well, sometimes Christmas presents were things that were made.
Oh, well,
You
yeah,
know.
usable.
They were used, but they were made.
You needed.
Or they were, you know,
Yeah. Not a lot of fancy toys and stuff like that, you know, some.
but that's
and a lot
okay,
of
'cause you
these were,
didn't know the difference.
a lot of these were homemade, like Millie and Mary Ann, you know, as they grew up, they were, you know, they liked dolls and stuff. Well, Dad would, I remember when he'd sit up at night, or out there working, building a little chest, you know, for them, so that they could sit at a little chest and a seat and chairs and stuff like that. And they were in their bedroom, actually. They had them in their bedroom, things like that. They were a big gift. Something like that was tremendous for young
Yeah,
kids like
it's
that.
a relative thing.
But those are things that you
But I do
really
What-
appreciated.
One mystery
No,
that
no,
I've
no.
never been able to figure out is Mom and Dad's bedroom was probably as big as from Dad to you to here. I mean, there was a double bed in there, and I remember 2 brooders, and there was nothing else. I mean, I don't remember any more room in there. It was
Well, they had a closet, they had the closets where you know, the closets that,
I don't
they
remember.
weren't in the wall, they were,
But they raised the chickens in there, and there was always a baby in the bed.
Well, they didn't raise them, they hatched.
They have to.
They have
They have the chickens.
They-
There was always a baby in the bed.
Oh, usually, yeah.
I mean, because
For a while.
the baby slept with mom and dad until they were probably 2 years old, I don't know, until the next baby. But when the hell did they ever find time to make a new